I never intended to hear what I did that night, but life has a way of dropping truths in your lap when you least expect them. It was close to midnight, and I was just coming back from the store, juggling a bag with a cheap bottle of wine and a couple of frozen dinners, the kind of meals that silently shout, "This marriage is barely holding together." The house was quiet when I walked in, but then I caught her voice. Low, sharp, and tinged with frustration. "I can't stand being with him, Sarah. I feel trapped. He's like a ghost I can't escape." The words hit me like a punch to the chest. I froze, my breath lodged somewhere between my lungs and my throat. I wasn't supposed to hear that. No one wants to hear that about themselves. And yet, there it was, loud and unflinching. In that moment, everything I had been ignoring about our marriage crystallized. Marriages often begin like a dream. Late-night whispers, promises that feel eternal, laughter over nothing, the kind that makes your heart feel full. But over time, dreams fade. Passion dulls. The late-night talks become routine silences. You start noticing the way someone turns away from you in bed, the way they sigh when you speak, the way their eyes seem to look right through you. I met Claire when we were just 20-something, both of us restless, chasing dreams too big for our little town. She had this spark, this energy, like the world revolved around the two of us. I thrived on that light. I lived for it. But as years passed, the spark dimmed. Life became predictable. I fell into a rhythm, work, come home, try to be the man she needed, but nothing seemed to stick. And standing there in the dark hallway, hearing her admit she hated being with me, I realized I had been living in a ghost of a relationship for longer than I knew. I could have barged into the room, demanded explanations, tried to convince her otherwise. But I didn't. Something in me shifted that night. I quietly went upstairs, packed a few clothes into a duffel bag, and slipped out. No notes, no drama, no confrontation. She wanted freedom, so I gave it to her. I drove to a rundown motel on the outskirts of town, the kind with paint peeling off the walls, a faint smell of mildew in the hallways, and a sense that everyone checking in had their own secret battles. I sat on the lumpy bed, staring at the faded wallpaper, thinking about how long she must have felt this way. How long had I been nothing more than a shadow in her life? The next morning, my phone exploded with calls, texts, and voicemails. "Where are you? We need to talk. Please come back." It was almost comical. The woman who couldn't stand being near me suddenly panicked the moment I wasn't there. And for once, I let her sit with that panic. Let her taste the fear of losing someone who had always been there, someone who had loved her despite the growing distance. 2 days later, she showed up at the motel. When I opened the door, she looked broken, eyes hollow, hair messy, voice trembling. "Why did you go?" she whispered. I laughed, a hollow, dry sound. "Do you really need me to spell it out?" Her eyes darted away, but she swallowed hard. "You weren't supposed to hear that," she mumbled. And that's when I realized the real problem. It wasn't just what she said, it was that I had caught her saying it. Her guilt, her panic, all of it became the center of our collision. Something inside me snapped, and for the first time in years, I stepped aside and let her in, but I didn't let her back into my heart. She hovered, unable to sit, unable to speak. "Was it true?" I asked. The pause that followed lasted longer than it should. And in that silence, she said more than words ever could. Claire fumbled, searching for a reason, an excuse, some way to tether me back to her, but I had already left. Emotionally, I had walked out the moment I heard those words. She stammered, "I was upset. I didn't mean it like that." I shook my head. "You don't say something like that unless it's real." Tears welled in her eyes. She whispered, "I love you," but I cut her off gently, firmly. I didn't need her love anymore. Not the love she had given that had been laced with resentment, not the love that had turned into something unrecognizable. She broke down then, sobbing in a way that made my heart ache, not for her, but for what we had lost. For years, I had been the one who hurt, questioning whether I was enough, wondering if I had failed. Now, it was her turn to face the emptiness of a life without me in it. and I didn't go back. I stayed away. The divorce, when it finally came, was messy, full of arguments and long nights of reflection, but for me, the hardest part wasn't leaving legally. The hard part had been leaving emotionally, stepping out of a life where I was no longer wanted. Somewhere along the line, I realized that leaving wasn't the challenge. Staying would have been. Staying in a place where my presence was a burden, where love had turned to obligation, where my heart no longer felt at home. Over time, Claire tried to reach out, once or twice, hoping to rekindle something long dead. But I had already moved on, found a peace I hadn't known for years. I discovered what it felt like to wake up without that heavy weight of resentment pressing on my chest. And eventually, I met someone new, someone whose gaze made me feel like I mattered, like I was whole again, like I carried stars in my eyes just by existing. Looking back, I realize now that the moment I overheard her confession wasn't a tragedy, it was a liberation. It was a wake-up call I desperately needed. It forced me to confront a truth I had avoided, that sometimes love isn't enough if respect, admiration, and desire have faded. And sometimes, leaving isn't running away, it's saving yourself from a life where you're unseen, unheard, and unloved. I don't dwell on anger or resentment. I don't play the what-if game anymore. Life has a way of humbling you, of teaching you lessons in the most painful ways. Over those quiet nights in the motel, staring at cracked wallpaper, I learned about self-worth. I learned that silence can be more telling than any argument, and that absence can sometimes speak louder than 1,000 apologies. The truth is, we stayed together for too long, not because we were happy, but because we feared what life would be like apart. But in that fear, we lost the very thing we had once cherished. And when I finally stepped away, I realized the beauty of finding myself again. The freedom to breathe, to exist, to be seen without compromise, to be loved for who I was rather than who I was expected to be. Claire's regret was real, and yes, it stung to witness it. But it was her journey, not mine. I didn't need her sorrow to validate my choice. I had discovered my own strength, my own worth, and that was far more valuable than any reconciliation. Life had shown me that sometimes love isn't about holding on, it's about letting go, even when it hurts, even when it's messy, even when the world seems to expect you to stay. In the end, walking away wasn't about punishment or revenge. It was about survival, about reclaiming a life that had been quietly suffocating under the weight of unspoken resentment. And in leaving, I found something I hadn't felt in years: peace. Real peace. The kind that whispers, "You deserve better," and reminds you that your worth isn't tied to someone else's approval. And when you finally meet someone whose eyes light up when they see you, who cherishes you without question, you understand what it means to be truly seen, truly valued, and truly loved. It's a feeling that erases the years of doubt, the nights of heartache, and the weight of silent resentment. And that, more than anything else, makes every painful step of the past worth it.